it's not a day job. What I do, it is me. That's really why I wanted to do it, because it's not a job.
It's not a job.
No, I never wanted to have a job. So me and my work is all rolled into one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because you did say that you were lucky for 27 years now to not really do a job. You just...
Yes, I haven't. I am now actually a couple of days a week, actually formally on a payroll at Central. But yeah, for the vast majority of time, the last time, I can't remember even when I had like a full-time paid like 9 to 5 office job. Never really, only for very short periods of time. Yeah, I was very clear from school, like I was never going to do like anything like an office job or like a 9 to 5 job. I was going to make my work and make my living from being me and being what I wanted to do. So that's always been the priority for me. Yeah.
Yeah, because like the next question was like, in one of your tweets, you talk about your childhood experience. So when I was about 12, I said, I want to work in theatre. And another boy warned that you want to be careful, it's full of puffs. Yeah. And he said that this honestly never crossed your mind, but instantly thought even better.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about that. And then, sort of walking home from school and people saying, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? So I said, I want to work in theatre. And one of the other boys said, oh, you want to be really careful you work in theatre because it's full of puffs. And I'd never really thought about it. But yeah, I do remember thinking to myself privately, oh my God, really? That's even better then. That's like everything in one go.
Yeah.
That's great.
So why did you want to work in theatre like before that?
That's all I ever wanted to do. I hadn't really seen theatre. So I don't know why, but I just always made up stories with puppets and put on costumes and imitated things and learned magic tricks. I don't know, just everything in my whole childhood was about like putting on little performances. So in a way, my life's been very simple and very easy in that way, because from the age of like tiny, I knew what I wanted to do. So every choice in life has been easy, because it's like, well, I want to do those subjects because that's going to help me with theatre. I need to go there to do theatre. So I've never been like, who am I? What am I doing? It's always been just like one thing.
And you've always been faithful to yourself as well. You've been making choices that never compromise who you are. Yeah,
because I think because I follow what I'm passionate about and what I enjoy doing. And ultimately, it's been possible to make a living out of that. So, and it would spoil it if I did something that I didn't want to do for money. I'm now so hardwired that I just can't do that. I just literally am not able to make something if I'm not curious and passionate and feel playful about it. Literally nothing comes out anyway, so there's no point like trying to do something thinking, oh, but the paycheck.
Yeah. So, because the next question goes back to the beginning of your career with shopping and facking. So in Dan Rebelato's introduction to the collection of your plays, that in February 2000, as the Royal Court prepared to open the newly refurbished theatre in Sloane Square, the press reported a problem with the computer system. The settings on the internal network designed to inhibit the sending of obscene or abusive emails were preventing anyone mentioning the name of one of the court's most successful plays of the 1990s, Mark Ravenhill's Shopping and Fucking. So how did it feel to break the system as a playwright?
Well, that was quite fun. I guess they had to work out how then to, it's just quite a silly, fun thing. But it was a brand new computer system, so I guess it was designed for like a more corporate situation, where I guess some corporation doesn't want people sending emails around with some words in, but obviously the Royal Court would have had to rethink that software, not just for my play, because almost any play they're going to be sending as attachments backwards and forwards is going to have words that probably other corporations don't want anybody to ever use. So, I'm sure my play was like one of hundreds that they deal with all the time. That they so I guess they must have changed the software or set up some sort of exclusions or something. So anyway, it's quite a fun little story.
They say that also Dan says that that chopping and fucking has entered the public consciousness in a way that no play has done, perhaps since John Osborne's Look Back in Anger 40 years before. So you've kind of done something that became a landmark almost. Like there is pre-Mark Ravenhill and post-Mark Ravenhill.
Well, there's lots of others very substantial playwrights around the same time. I mean, Sarah Kane is a really genuinely like landmark playwright. But yeah, I mean that play partly because the title's memorable and had a further life in the West End and so on. Yeah, and mostly because of the catchy title. But there's lots of people who don't even go to the theatre who've heard of that play.
Yeah.
But it's because the title is...
Yeah, was it a conscious choice or just kind of it came up?
The title?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really was expecting just to put the play on with some friends, at a pub theatre, in which case the title would have just been... not such a thing. So I hadn't really written it with the view to it be the sort of title that would have to be up in like big neon letters outside a West End theatre or something like that. So I think within the context of like a pub theatre thing, which just a group of people in their 20s would come and see, was really how I'd called the play that. So I probably would have been more self-conscious and maybe not called it that if I thought I was going to play in big theatres and be... But I mean, I'm glad that I didn't change the title, but it's really just only intended to be a title for probably something that a few hundred people are going to see.
So was anyone like maybe advising you against it, or was like
only one person said, "Oh, you should change the title," but actually most people didn't. That was one person out of 100 people said, "Oh, you should think about changing that title." But no, most people went, "Oh, that's a great title."
Because that play and other plays that I've read, they are very to me they are very visceral and like so full of emotion and like the images spring straight into my head, if that makes sense. It's like this incredible reading experience even before even seeing it staged. I'm wondering, when you're writing, do you also feel all those things when you
I mean, I guess every writer's different, but yeah, I think that, your brain's working in at least two parts. There's one part that's really shaping and structuring and doing the sort of mechanics. But yeah, then you have to really inhabit all of those moments and those characters and stuff. So I think you're more or less got a big sort of, at least two bits of your brain going at the same time. One that's very consciously crafting it and shaping it, but yeah, you have to really inhabit it as well. But also you have to have a visual eye as well, so there's one part of your brain that can see the action of the play and see those images and create those images. So yeah, I think you're doing quite a lot of things pretty much at the same time as you're writing that stuff, being inside it, being outside it, hearing it, picturing it. It's you sort of train your brain to do all those different things at the same time.
So it is trained. Like when you were younger, it was a bit more difficult maybe to put that line.
Yeah, I think you sort of work it. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I was always putting on plays and obsessed by plays and fascinated by plays. But then, but then when I decided that one of the things I wanted to do was focus on the writing, then you quite consciously set out to sort of train myself to do that. There weren't any courses. It wasn't really taught at universities, playwriting at that stage. So yeah, I just made up exercises for myself and sort of sat at my kitchen table for a couple of years, training myself to do. I sort of made up my own playwrights training, really.
Yeah, because another question I have about your 101 exercises for playwrights that you launched recently, and in one of your tweets you said that a lot of people are shocked that you want to kind of give out advice for free. What's your motivation behind helping people to write?
I hadn't really consciously thought about it. A couple of years ago, I did 101 notes for playwrights that were all self-contained tweets, and that really took off, and I got a lot of followers very quickly. And then I was quite surprised when some people, quite a lot of them are American, but not just American, some people from this country said, "I can't believe you're giving away what you know for free." I was like, I was quite shocked. I was like, I just didn't cross my mind that you would like charge money for this stuff. And so then it made me stop and think, well, actually, you know, I did grow up at a time when education was free. And it was kind of still is immoral to charge money for knowledge. Because very little of it is like totally original thought you've learnt from other people, and you're combining different things that you've learnt. So it wasn't that I started it as some like crusade, like I'm going to spread knowledge for free. That's how I thought of knowledge. So it was the surprise when people said, why aren't you charging for this? And then like some Americans like forwarding it, going, hey guys, get on board. Some guy's giving away what they would charge you for an MA for free. I was like, oh, okay. But so then I wanted to build on that. So yeah, at the moment I'm doing these 101 exercises for playwrights, which obviously quite a lot longer than the tweets, but using a platform called Button Down, which works a bit like Substack. So I've got like 2,300 and something subscribers at the moment. So twice a week I send them like a playwriting exercise.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
but it's good for me.
Great,
it's good for me. You know, it helps me to like look back over what skills I developed and how to develop them, and sort of, you know, it helps me. I mean, I wouldn't do it, I wouldn't do it if I didn't also enjoy doing it.
Are you thinking of maybe publishing it?
Yeah, eventually. It'd be like, it's like doing the first draft of a book.
Yeah.
So eventually I would carry on working on it, but I think it's probably would become a book, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And you can combine the 101 notes and everything.
Yeah, I mean, they'll both be just a starting point. The book, each form has a slightly different like tone, and like the weekly letter is like a one-to-one thing. You want it to be quite chatty, quite informal, as though you are talking to the person who's just opened the email. Although I don't know the vast majority of them, but and a book would have a slightly different tone, but it's just getting the basic ideas and basic shape down through the 101 exercises, button down emails that would then give me an idea of like how to structure a book. But it probably would be quite different words, but the same basic thinking and basic exercises, yeah.
So in terms of knowledge, you also mentioned in one of your tweets that, you talk about Keith Johnstone's book, that improvisation and theatre, and you say that you were preparing to teach your class that day, and you bought this book 37 years prior, and it's the basis of everything you've done ever since, and it's beyond life-changing. If you don't mind kind of expanding on that, why is it so life-changing, and why improvisation?
Keith Johnstone really sort of, I think, has got the closest to really unlocking just the very essence of sort of creativity. And I first bought that book when I was an undergraduate and used it when we were devising a show, but I sort of skipped reading the introduction, because why would you read an introduction? But then when I went back, like 10 years later, found it still on my shelf, and I read the introduction, I realised that he'd created this work coming out of actually starting a writers' group at the Royal Court in the 50s, the very first writers' group at the Royal Court, and the writers suddenly, for the first time, there hadn't really been writers' groups before, being in a room together and going, we're a writers' group, what do we do? What do we want to do? And they decided that they didn't want to sit around and talk about things. They actually wanted to get on their feet, try stuff out. And they started to devise improvisations and games and all sorts of things. So when I realised that the work had actually started with writers and Keith, because I'd always thought it has been something for actors and people devising shows, but actually the starting point was Keith being then a very young associate director or something at the Royal Court, and the young playwrights. I was like, oh, actually. So then I started to use that to generate my own writing. Keith's just very good at like getting rid of all your blocks and your things that get you to overanalyze and overstop, and getting you to really connect with what's possible. And you have to sort of work your way through the book really to get it. But it's he's been the inspiration for a lot of contemporary improvisation stuff, like you see impro nights or performances, but also it's great for writing. It's great for any form of creativity, actually. And having gone back to the book again and again and used it for my own writing and then for teaching and still using it. And you modify the exercises and you develop them as you go along. It's not like reading out from a book, we should copy these exercises. But I'd been doing it all that time, and then about 15 years ago, I thought, God, I've been using this inspiration all the time, but I've never actually done a workshop with Keith. And I knew by then, for a long time, he'd been teaching and working in Canada. So I was like, well, right, I have to go to Canada then. Have to like spend a summer in Canada and go to all his classes. So then I Googled like Keith Johnstone workshops, and he was coming to London like in 2 weeks' time and doing a week-long workshop in London. So I managed to get onto that. So I did like study with him for a week, which was great. So probably by the time I got to study him, it was like 25 years after I'd first read the book or something. But yeah, I think if somebody's like been a really inspiring figure to you, it's good to, if you can, like actually do a workshop with them or something like that.
So have you also thought about writing novels maybe?
I think it's a really different skill. And it's I don't think I'd be good at it. And a lot of playwriting is about condensing, because even quite a long play is at the very, very maximum like 25,000 words. Whereas a novel is at least 75,000 words. It's which leads you into a totally different way of thinking of writing, of working. Plus having to write a lot more words. I think you just get used to really squeezing things down, condensing them, leaving a lot out when you write a play. So you sort of train yourself to edit so much and to shape and squeeze that you in the way that you wouldn't for a novel. So no.
So what is a comfort zone for you? And like, what do you mean by stepping out of it, really?
Well, it's funny, people, when you do workshops and classes and stuff, I'm sure I do it myself often, that quite often, although we know that what we are drawn to when we're in the audience is something happening, our brain just justifies us. Just write scenes of people chatting, bantering, bitching, all at a very sort of low level. And it can feel quite good. It's like, I've got these people, blah, blah, blah. But then actually putting them into a situation where they had to actively do something, be faced with the possibility of having to make a choice or change, we're very fearful of that. And often people write for years and years and years of just filling the pages with this sort of banter or bitching or moaning, with nothing happening. And it's very few, that is like most people who do most playwriting classes and courses and stuff just don't get to that first base where one character even will risk the possibility of doing something and being exposed to the possibility of a choice and a change. It's the hardest thing to do as a writer, but as an audience, that's what we want. That's what we go there for. The same person who writes that stuff as an audience, if they just went for an hour and people are just having a bit of a bitch, bit of a banter, bit of a moan, they themselves would be bored rigid. So there's something about us that just wants to stay safe. We probably ourselves don't want to ever be exposed to having to make a tough choice or go through a big change. So we protect our play and our characters from doing it. But as a result, you don't really create anything.
So it's the kind of fear of change and something new and different happening, something going where you don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And fear of something that we don't know. Yeah, that the play might start to write itself or present us with new experiences. There's a danger that we just want to play to confirm what we already know. But yeah, as soon as you put a character into a new situation, we might have to learn new things about ourselves and learn new things about ourselves that we might not like as a writer.
Are you very peaceful with that? With every play, do you learn new things about yourself?
Hopefully you do. Yeah. And you have to switch off. We've all got survival instinct to want to be liked, to want to be seen as rational, to want to be seen as a good citizen, and blah 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 blah. But a play that sets out to prove I'm a nice person, a rational person, a good citizen, is a pretty dull play. So you're having to cut off any voices thinking, oh, but then people might think that you have to switch all that off and allow the play to be what it's going to be, and risk the possibility that people go, how could they be such an awful person to write such a play? That's the risk that you have to take, which you wouldn't want to do in real life. You would probably want it in any sort of meeting or party or real life situation. You want to keep up the thing of, I'm a good citizen, I'm a nice person, I'm a blah, blah, blah. I have all the same views as you do. We all agree with each other. And as soon as you write a play that moves forward, that moves the characters forward, then you risk also yourself of being not the nice, lovely, rational, sane person that you were at the party the night before.
Yeah, because in so many of your tweets and exercises and things you write straight out there for people on social media, you say that, we need more plays from people. And it's so, in a way, going back to that comment about your knowledge, giving your knowledge out for free, because you're such a famous, established writer and you've got like very secure position in the world of theatre. And it seems that the world of theatre is very competitive and it is difficult to get in and so on and so on. Oh. And yet you still encourage people to get in.
There's always going to be very few plays that are produced. It was always the case. They're quite expensive things to put on.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be, if people start writing plays thinking, it's unfair unless everybody who writes a play gets a production, I would suggest that they're entering into a slightly unreal world. The chances are, vast majority of plays will not get produced, and maybe the vast majority of plays shouldn't be produced. But what I would hope to do is to make it possible for a wider range of voices to get produced. So although there's only ever going to be like a very limited possibilities for plays produced, I would hope to, and seen it happen a bit over my career, that there's more diverse range of voices produced. So that even if there's only there's actually plenty of new plays produced in London, but say it was only 10 in a year. Even when I started 30 years ago, if there were 10 plays produced in a year, it would have been like 8 or 9 of them would have been by white men, and maybe one or two by women, and that was it. And it is starting to get more diverse. So I think sharing the skills as widely as you can isn't a case of and suddenly all of you are going to get plays on, but hopefully it's sharing the skills with people who might not have had the same access to the skills, and ultimately, if you only have 10 productions on a year, that they tell very different stories and they come from people from different backgrounds and different communities, would be what I'd hope.
Yeah, because there's also other side of the story that I'm really curious to hear your opinion about. There's Salman Rushdie said, according to the Times, that if we're in a world where only women can write about women, and only people from India can write about people from India, and only straight people can write about straight people, then that's the death of art. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I guess I'm a slightly different generation from Salman Rushdie. I don't know how I really feel about that. I think it's more of a case-by-case basis. I think there are some stories and some situations where you want that story should be told by somebody with the direct lived experience of it.
So we are now in a times
and there's other stories where different people can tell it, and I'm maybe I'm just sitting on the fence a bit, but I think Salman Rushdie comes to that generation where, in theory, anybody should write about anything, but in truth, the whole industry was dominated by middle-class white men who had the right to write about anything. I would feel that it would be sad if it was so locked down that every single story in the whole world had to be directly related to somebody's personal identity and personal experience. I think we're in a position where you can probably think different things are appropriate and creative in different situations and for different stories. So I suppose I'm a little bit in between on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, so do you think then the theatre of the 21st century that will be more of the diverse voices and the lived experience voices rather than few people doing lots of different
I would hope
stories?
so.
Yeah.
I would hope so. I feel like we've made a bit of progress on that. Whether we can carry on making that progress, I don't know. But I think there has been a big push, and I think it has yielded some results of actually our stories and representations coming from wider groups of people, which is exciting. It's I'm all for just like getting the work better. So if you open up the possibility of people coming from different backgrounds and different experiences, ultimately you should get better work. So I hope that progresses. But who knows what's around the corner?
Do you think it is actually possible to put on more plays that are written like collaboratively with like R&D process, with like maybe different community groups in the
I find all that. Yeah, I'm sure it would be. I still think lots of probably the most exciting plays are led by one writer who's passionate about what they want to do. I'm not so convinced by endless R&D processes and all of that stuff. But yeah, there's plenty of range of work. The West End at the moment is actually got more transfers of new work and more straight plays on and new plays on than it has for probably 25 years or 20 years or so. So the West End, it's a constantly changing ecology, and actually the West End has opened. I think their model economically has been changed slightly. So there's actually quite a lot of new work in the West End at the moment.
You shared your experience having soup at Waterstones, where you had a soup at top floor of Waterstones Piccadilly.
I've forgotten that. Oh yes, remind me what happened.
So table one side is writers group giving each other toe curling notes. The other side, an agent editor talking to a writer. Could you draw on your Indian heritage but write something set in this country? The soup is good.
Yes, that's right. I'd forgotten about that. It just seemed like quite a funny situation to me. It's a really nice cafe at the top of Waterstones Piccadilly, but I sat at a quiet table to have my soup, and then at one side, I had these playwrights, I think. Or no, maybe they weren't playwrights. Maybe they were novelists or something. Who just had a little writers group and they were just moaning, and then that's what writers do normally when they get together. But the other side was an agent with a young writer. And I think the writer had written who was of Indian heritage. I think might even have been from India still, and so had written a story set in India. So the agent was saying in a slightly embarrassed sort of way, but that's what they wanted them to do. Was like, could you take all that Indian stuff, but then could you set your story in England so that the readers can sort of relate to it? So I thought it was quite a nice little sort of snapshot of two different writer situations, but literally either side of the table to me. Well, I'd just gone in hoping to have a little quiet soup, and then I was overhearing these two stories.
So you always are alert and observing other people in the world.
So I guess that was sort of the flip side of what Salman is saying there. Actually, the white agent was sort of asking or sort of telling for her marketability how Indian or not Indian she wanted this writer to be to make her work sellable, which is quite true.
Yeah, because that's the thing.
She was like, the basic note was, it's good that it's Indian, but maybe it's a bit too Indian. Maybe it could be a bit less Indian.
Yeah, well.
Which will happen. Yeah, happens a lot.
Because that's the thing with money. I'm interested because you also mention you compare often Berlin art funding to London art funding.
Berlin do give a lot of money to the arts, compared to almost anywhere, but certainly compared to the UK. They've set themselves the new target now to be reached quite soon of the city of Berlin having £1 billion money for the arts in a couple of years, which is more than the whole of the UK. So it's a different attitude to the arts and a different attitude to public money for the arts in the whole of Germany, and it's different.
Yeah, because I'm interested then. Okay, so if we in the UK have more limited resources in that sense, where should the money go then?
Yeah.
Ideally, effectively.
Oh, who knows? Who knows?
Because you were artistic director for some time, so I can imagine.
But we didn't have any. Yeah, I was for just for a year. I was artistic director of a little fringe theatre called the King's Head, which completely doesn't have any public money. I mean, once as the money from the Arts Council gets less and less, it is more a question of where should it go. And I don't know. There's a danger that if you spread it too thinly, which I think is a danger of now, that lots of organisations, lots of companies get a little bit of money, but it's not really enough to do anything substantial and actually. But then if you concentrate it too much, then obviously that's not great. I don't know really what the answer is. Arts funding and even arts provision has been concentrated in London, but actually became more concentrated in London from the 80s and 90s onwards. So it's definitely money should be dispersed more evenly nationally. There's just a criminal. You can't really justify it. Focus of money in London. So if public money doesn't increase but has to be distributed, a small amount of money has to be redistributed. I would say my only priority would be definitely outside of London.
Because you're very supportive of other artists, because in one of your tweets you replied to Georgie Greer. You remember that when she performed at her play Sunsets at Edinburgh Fringe?
Oh yeah, everybody replied to Georgie Greer because that was so sweet, and then it made her show into a hit because I think nobody came to her first preview, or one person or something, and it was and she became one of the stories of the Fringe, so that everybody replied to that and retweeted it. So then the rest of her run was a sellout. Because she was famous as the woman who had nobody turned up to her show, or one person or something, and she did a really great photo
of her crying,
of her crying in the mirror, and so everybody responded. I cannot claim to be special about that. It was literally thousands of people responded to that.
Yeah. So what's the really importance of supporting each other in that sense, instead of competing maybe? Because I guess it's easy to fall into the mode of competition with other artists.
I don't find people in theatre very competitive in that way, actually. I'm always amazed by other professions, stand-ups just slag each other off the whole time. If you sit with one stand-up, they tell you how awful all the other stand-ups are. But then stand-up is a sort of solo game, so but I find people in theatre are nearly always curious to see what other people in the theatre are doing. And I think because you have, on the whole, you are working in companies together, so you have to share and get on. But also I think people in theatre, are realistic and just accepting the fact that your mates are in all sorts of different shows. So somebody might be in a musical, somebody might be in touring something, somebody might be in something quite experimental, and you don't, criticise or judge people for the different work that they're doing. But I just think in my experience, the theatre community in the UK, really my 95% of my experience is London, is just supportive of each other and go and see each other's shows and encouraging of each other. That's one of the things I like about theatre. I mean, and I think it's probably different. A little bit of contact I've had with rock and roll and pop and stuff, that seems like a pretty mean business. Stand-ups are just horrible people. And just slag each other off the whole time.
What about writers? You say they like to moan.
Well, they like to moan, but they are quite supportive of each other. Yeah, but they always just complain about stuff. But writers, playwrights that I know are always supportive of each other. Yeah.
So it is, even as a writer, because I guess a lot of people maybe think of a writer as someone who sits in the cottage.
I wish I had a cottage.
With a quill.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just solitary things. But in theatre, you do have to be part of the larger group and the network.
You get involved with the rehearsals and I mean, obviously you still spend more time alone than working on it than most other people involved in theatre, actors or directors. But also, yes, the nice thing about being a playwright is there's plenty of alone time. but not as much as if you were a pure writer, a novelist, or a poet, or whatever. Although novelists nowadays have to go up and down the length of the country, meeting people all the time, signing books and all that. But you get involved in rehearsals, and so you share in the sort of communal and collaborative aspects of theatre as well. Yeah.
Because in one of your other interviews, you say you talk about it's better to write whatever than to have a blank page, because then you can improve.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about the aspect of the, because as before you mentioned the fear of being judged, like other people have when they are writers and they try to put things out there and so on. How do you actually seek out the input of other people and the comments on your writing? Or you just don't mind it, you just do your thing?
No, I mean, I think it varies slightly for different plays and different situations. There comes a point when you want somebody to look at it and say, does this just make any sense to you? But I think with the sort of workshop culture and the development culture that you mentioned briefly, there can sometimes be too much pressure too soon for young writers. Like, show it to everybody. Everybody's going to have an opinion. Everybody's going to tell you what to do. I think sitting on having ownership of your own writing and the ability to judge and criticise your own writing and to make it better through your own judgment is a really important thing to have, not to be infantilised by, I don't know, I just write this stuff and then other people workshop it and tell me what needs to be done to it. I think it's important to have a sense of covering the pages, just letting it all splurge out, but then having the tools to go, okay, I've written all this stuff. Now, how am I going to edit it? How am I going to shape it? How am I going to rewrite it? I think to be able to develop those skills as your own skills, not something that you're totally reliant on everybody else to sort out for you, is a good thing to do.
Because you're a teacher now, technically.
Only technically, it has to be pointed out. There's not that much teaching that goes on. Yeah, I do genuinely see myself as more just the students learn from each other.
Yeah,
and I'm more just somebody who sort of holds the room and allows that exchange of experiences to happen. I don't use any PowerPoint presentations. That's my number one rule. So there is no like telling people stuff like here's a list of things that you must learn. It's creating a room and guiding people and but hopefully when it's going well, the students are learning from each other and from themselves and not from me.
But what if the things they're saying are not very adequate to maybe your experience of the industry? Like maybe they are going in not the direction that it's in at the moment, or they have a wrong idea of what being a playwright is like in day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And it's a fine balance, isn't it? I mean, you want people, because I'm working with undergraduates, you want people to have room to just play and dream and stuff.
Because it is a very romantic age between 18, 22.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting. Even though society's changed so much, most of the undergraduates I work with are still quite dreamy about what they do. They're not really thinking about what it's for or how they're going to make money from it and what industry there is, which is good really to have.
Really?
It's good to have that space. Hopefully to get towards the third year, which I'm doing a bit now with the just start to point it a bit towards, actually by now, quite quickly, you're going to have to start earning some money but yeah, it would be awful if the whole 3 years of this course, which I'm working on, called Writing for Performance, was like, don't have any new ideas because this is what an industry is and this is what the industry wants you to do. And so it's a balance of giving actually some space when you're 18 to 21 or whatever people are, to actually just have a breathing space to play and to dream and stuff. But then having some responsibility not to send them out at the end of the course without turning them a bit towards vocation. It's a balance.
Because I do remember when you invited agents for a talk and we all came and you were kind of pressing the agent to say, okay, so what's the fee? What's the fee?
I know they were being quite coy. At the end of the day, you've got to know what they pay you, haven't you? Yeah. Well,
but it's still, to me, as a person who unfortunately doesn't have a bank of mum and dad and have to think about money all the time, really, and the agent saying £12,000 plus the ticket sales, the percentage of ticket sales, which for me was like, wait a minute, so I have to have like 2 or 3 sell-out plays to live in London? That's
you do.
the best of us.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it was clear that but she was talking about quite a small theatre. She didn't really have massive aspirations for her clients in terms of the income that you can earn from theatre. But yes, realistically, you're probably not going to make your whole living from theatre. So most people have a mixed balance of screenwriting and theatre writing, and the majority of their income is going to come from screenwriting. But I think, you can set people's expectations too low. There are plenty of people, not masses, but there's good few hundred people at any one time who are making a living from a balance. Many of them a good living, a balance from screenwriting and stage writing in the UK. So, there's always going to be many, many more people wanting to do it than actually end up doing it. But you can start earning quite a good living quite early on if you're doing a balance of developing material for TV companies and writing even for fringe theatres. You can make a living.
Yeah, because it is about being proactive. I can imagine about reaching out rather than waiting to.
Yeah, don't wait.
Just go out there and do it. Really.
Yeah.
Because you do say that there was an encounter you had with one of your fans, and they said, "Oh, we want another play from Mike Ravenhill," and you said straight away in your tweet, like, "We want another play from you,"
Yeah. I thought, so yes, that's a very nice thing to have. There's not many people who are going to get that. So I thought, how amazing that somebody should stop me in the street and say, "We want another play from you." It gives you sort of validity. And I thought, actually, most people wouldn't have that. So let's just tweet out but no, I'll pass it on. As many people as you want. I want to play from you.